We're used to seeing samurai as noble anime heroes, warriors whose honor means everything. But if we really want to understand their true history, we have to drop the romance and look at that era through the eyes of an ordinary person. Imagine this. You're a regular Japanese farmer, carrying your basket of rice, and you accidentally brush shoulders with someone on the street. For you, it's nothing, a small mistake. But if that someone happens to be a samurai, your life could end in an instant. This isn't a horror movie scene. It was a very real rule called kirisute gomen, the legal right to kill on the spot for what was considered insufficient respect. The samurai could wipe his blade and casually continue on his way to drink tea. Today, we'll briefly break down how these warriors went from ordinary bodyguards to an elite class that kept an entire country in fear, and where the samurai as a social class ultimately disappeared. Samurai didn't appear as noble knights. They were born out of chaos. In the 8th century, Japan's state army had become so ineffective that wealthy landowners were forced to defend themselves. So they armed their own men. People who came to be called samurai, which literally means one who serves. At first, they weren't aristocrats at all. They were professional, hired fighters whose job was simple: protect the land and the harvest. And here's the surprising part. The earliest samurai didn't even fight with katanas. Their primary weapon was the longbow. They were mounted archers, trained to hit an enemy in the face at full gallop from a serious distance. Only over time did this security service grow so powerful that the samurai pushed their own employers aside and took control of the country themselves. When the samurai took power, the sword became their main symbol. But it wasn't just decoration. It was a tool that had to be flawless. To test a new katana, warriors performed tameshigiri, a sharpness test. This was a harsh trial. Most often, swords were tested on the bodies of executed criminals, and sometimes, in the darkest periods of history, living people became the victims. Entire manuals were written on how to slice a human body in half with a single strike. If the blade passed easily through the pelvis or spine, it was considered a masterpiece. If it got stuck in the ribs, shame on the swordsmith. This was an era where the aesthetics of death and the perfection of weaponry went hand in hand. We've all heard of the Bushido Code, but it's important to understand, most of the rules in this code were written in the 17th to 18th centuries, when Japan finally enjoyed peace. It was an attempt to idealize warriors who had already started losing their real purpose by that time. In the real days of constant warfare, samurai were primarily pragmatists. When survival or new lands were on the line, honor often took a back seat. Betrayals, switching sides mid-battle for profit, or striking from behind were all part of military strategy. They were professional killers following the laws of war, not saints from legends. A samurai's life was far from comfortable. Their famous O Yoroi armor was made from steel and leather, laced together with silk cords. It looked majestic, but in the rain, the silk would get wet, making the armor incredibly heavy. In damp conditions, mold often grew under the plates, and warriors had to endure terrible hygiene during long campaigns. Even their hairstyles had a practical purpose. The forehead was shaved so that under the heavy helmet, the head wouldn't sweat as much, and hair wouldn't fall into their eyes in the heat of battle. And of course, seppuku. This wasn't a romantic act. It was a painful and slow procedure through which a warrior demonstrated his unbreakable resolve. That's why a kaishakunin was always nearby, an assistant tasked with beheading the samurai to end his suffering when the pain became unbearable. The decline of this great caste didn't happen just because of lost battles. They were defeated by time and technology. The appearance of firearms in the hands of ordinary peasants proved one thing: bullets don't care about your ancestry. When the wars ended, thousands of professional warriors found themselves in a new world where their skills were no longer needed. They began transforming into officials, accountants, and clerks. In the 19th century, samurai were officially forbidden from carrying swords and were forced to change their hairstyles. Many of them joined the police or went into business, laying the foundation for modern Japan. Swords ended up in museums, and the old codes became part of a culture that today inspires millions through movies and anime. Today, their legacy isn't territorial wars, it's global corporations and the strict discipline that helped shape Japan into what it is today. And that's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.